belief in the unseen that exists on the individual level. The collective belief in the unseen that we practice in the scientific world is something that we all experience and that we as a world experience. Whenever we make any progress, then we collectively benefit from that progress as well. For example, any invention that happens, whether it's the airplane or the computer, it was based on some people who believed that it was possible before anyone else thought it was. And then they're investing into that idea. So that's a collective belief in the unseen, and we all benefit from it. Once somebody has invented an airplane or whatever it is, then we don't have to reinvent it, we don't have to go back and do it all over again. So this is an application of Iman bil Ghaib and belief in the unseen, where we all benefit and we all move forward. And one person's successes is our collective success. But there's another application of Iman bil Ghaib which applies to our individual lives, wherein each and every person and each and every generation has to remake that discovery. And that is a type of belief in the unseen that is important for our self-reformation, for our progress in life, and for our discovering what will truly grant us the nearness of God Almighty. Now, when we believe in the unseen on an individual level, there are different examples of how this manifests itself in our lives. Now, for example, there are different ways that we have hypotheses in our life, not just in the scientific method that scientists or inventors or business people apply in the lab or in the business world, but it has to do with our individual lives as well. When we decide, for example, that we want to go into a certain career, that we want to go down a certain path of education, the reason and the motive that a person has behind doing it is because he believes that it will make him happy. He has information, he has knowledge, he knows that if I want to become a pharmacist, then I'll make this amount of money. He's collected all the evidence that he needs in that regard. He's talked to different people who are already in that field. He knows that this is what my daily routine will be. This is the type of company that I will keep. This is my socioeconomic status. This is how people will look at me. So this is all the information that he has gathered about his decision to want to become a pharmacist or whatever field he wants to go into. But one thing that he doesn't know for certain is the actual reason as to why he is doing it, which is the pursuit of happiness. He doesn't know whether this field is going to make him happy. And that's the real motivation that is behind every single action that we do. Whether it is a field that we choose to go into, whether it is a field that we choose to study into, or any major life decision that we make. Everything is motivated by this pursuit of happiness. And each and every time we make this decision, it is based on Iman bil Ghaib. It is a risk that we're taking. We gather a great deal of information, evidence, that supports the fact that we think that it will make us happy. But ultimately there is that element of surprise in it. There's that element of mystery. Ultimately, that decision is a hypothesis. It is a hypothesis that if I make this decision, then I hope that it will ultimately make me happy. A person may be materialistic, and so he decides based on the fact of how much income that job or how lucrative it can be, that this will make me happy. A person may be people-oriented, and he decides that based on that, I think this career will involve me with a lot of people and helping people, so I think that will make me happy. So this shows that this individual pursuit of happiness that we have, it is always based on Iman bil Ghaib. On an individual level, humanity has not yet been able to conclusively figure out, based on any evidence, what it is that actually makes us happy. Despite the fact that from the Stone Ages, since the very time of our existence, this has been the central purpose of our lives. This is something that is written into the very fabric of our nature and into our DNA, the pursuit of happiness. But despite that fact, up until now, this is still an individual discovery that each individual has to make on his own. And this is something that each generation has to endeavor into on their own. And so this is not a collective discovery that one person can make and then we all benefit from it. It is not that Socrates defined happiness 2,000 or 3,000 years ago or whatever it was, and then now we know what happiness is and now we have the key to it. Or a certain other philosopher or a certain saint or a prophet of God told us, and now the door has been unlocked for each and every one of us. So this shows that there are two categories of discoveries. And the application of a hypothesis, of belief in the unseen, is equally applicable to both of those categories of discovery. There is the scientific discoveries, the business discoveries, the inventions, the collective discoveries that we make as a humanity. And that is the world of science, that is the world of material progress. And that is where one person's progress benefits everyone else, and we don't have to redo any of the work. And the other aspect of human progress is individual, and that is where individual belief in the unseen comes into play. This is how Iman bil Ghaib comes into play in our individual lives. And this is how this hypothesis, this aspect or this analogy of the scientific method comes into play in our lives. Whenever we make any decision, we have to go through this process. And this is also how that concept that the promised Messiah ﷺ has described takes place in our lives. Hazrat Masih Maud ﷺ has described that when a person seeks to find Allah Almighty, first he goes through the stage of ilmul yaqeen, in which he simply knows by knowledge that a God should exist. That is a sort of an analogy to a hypothesis. But he doesn't know that God exists, he just knows that a God should exist. Huzur gave the analogy that it's like a person seeing smoke in the distance. He knows that a fire should be there, although he hasn't seen the fire yet. And so that is what essentially a hypothesis is. He's made observations, and so he makes an inferential leap that there must be something there. That is a sort of hypothesis that we make in our own lives as well. Again, take the analogy of somebody wanting to go into a certain field. A person decides that he wants to be a teacher when he grows up. And so he makes a leap. He decides to go into this field of education. He goes towards that major. He invests 4 to 6 years of his life getting educated in this field. Based on this ilmul yaqeen, based on this hypothesis that he's gathered, based on observations and information that he believes that this will make me happy. Because our central purpose is the pursuit of happiness. Then Hazrat Masih Maud ﷺ describes that when a person progresses in this hypothesis and he experiments with it, and he tries and he strives to seek nearness to Allah Almighty, he prays to Allah Almighty, and his prayers are answered, he has different sort of experiences on the lower levels of spirituality. Then he progresses to the stage of Ainul Yaqeen, where he has a certainty as though he has seen the truth, as if he has seen something. And Huzur gave the analogy that is like a person who no longer just knows that there's fire there because he sees the smoke, but he actually sees the fire itself. And so this is where a person actually begins to view God to an extent, from a distance, that he experiences God from a distance. And so he now has a sort of shahadat or a witness in his life. This is where his hypothesis progresses to the stage of something that we can give an analogy of a theory, the next stage in the scientific method. And this is also something that can be an analogy to our individual pursuit of happiness. That student who went into school based on the hypothesis that being a teacher would make him happy, then when he actually starts to go into the field, perhaps when he gets an internship or whatever it is, and he starts to experience a little bit what it actually is to be in that daily routine, what it is to be in that income bracket, what it is to be in that socioeconomic status, and in that sort of circle of people, he now has some experience at least of what that lifestyle is. And so it's no longer a hypothesis. He starts to actually experience from a distance or just from the very beginning that is this making me happy or not? Is this something that is really fulfilling my pursuit of happiness? So now the mystery begins to leave that person, and he begins to enter a higher stage of certainty. So this is how all of these different processes work in parallel to one another. It is the same pattern that is happening in life, on the collective level, on the individual level, on a spiritual level, and on a psychological level. It's just identifying that pattern in these different areas. So this is the second stage of a person's progress in belief in the unseen. What we can refer to from one perspective as a theory, from another perspective we can refer to it as Ainul Yaqeen. Then finally, the promised Messiah ﷺ describes that there is the third stage of knowing and having certainty about the existence of God, which is Haqqul Yaqeen, in which a person actually experiences God. Now it is no longer just a hypothesis or just a string of experiences or witnessing God from a distance or having a sort of far-fetched or having a sort of faint experience of God. But it is where a person actually experiences God. He experiences revelation from God Almighty. He develops a real relationship with God Almighty. And his prayers are answered and his communication with God is confirmed through the realities of what happens in this world. He sees that things happen in this world in response to that relationship with God Almighty. And it is no longer just an individual relationship, but it is something that affects the world around him. And he is certain that it is now a reality. And so he is more certain of the existence of God than he is of anything else. And that certainty is as real to him as any other human experience that we have is real to us. The same way that we are certain that anything exists in our lives because we perceive it with our five senses. In the same way, a person who reaches Haqqul Yaqeen knows that God exists because he has experienced God with his senses and has witnessed him in the world and has witnessed him in his own experience. This also applies to that same stage of progress that we see in our scientific realm and also in our personal human experience. When a hypothesis progresses to a greater stage of certainty and reaches the stage of a theory, and then when it is experienced on so many on such a collective level and so repeatedly that at a certain point it finally reaches the stage of being a fact, and it becomes recognized as a fact that we all recognize. There are many things that we may be surprised to learn that are actually considered a theory in the scientific realm. There are not that many things that are considered a fact. And so there's a very stringent definition and a sort of standard of evidence that is required for something to be a fact. And so this is also a sort of method and a process that happens in our individual lives and in our process of gaining certainty about God Almighty as well. And when we bring this back to the pursuit of happiness, and we look at the example of a person who goes into a certain field thinking that it will make him happy, when a person who's gone into the teaching field, once he's been a teacher for 5 years, for 10 years, for 15 years, and he's actually experienced it, now he knows for a fact that this field is going to make him happy or whether it is going to make him unhappy. Now he knows for certainty, and there is no more mystery in it. So this is how he progressed in his pursuit of happiness. So we can see that this is an example of how we have belief in the unseen on an individual level. Every one of our actions is motivated by the pursuit of happiness. And we have to go through this process of this mystery, of this risk, of this iman bil ghaib in order to reach that certainty. A person starts off at only a hypothesis. He asks other people who are in that same field, who have attained happiness. He knows that some people are teachers who are miserable, some people are happy. And he knows from the people who have years of experience that certain people know for a fact that they are miserable and certain people know for a fact that they are happy. He gathers all this information and he makes this decision. And then he has that experience himself, and finally he knows that something is actually a true means of happiness for him. So this iman bil ghaib, this process of going through a hypothesis, a theory, and a fact, this process of ilmul yaqeen, ainul yaqeen, and haqqul yaqeen, it is a pattern that plays itself out in various aspects of our lives. And it is important to understand so that we can progress in all of these aspects of our lives. That when we wish to progress materially in our lives, we must have an iman bil ghaib, a belief in the unseen, a willingness to take risks. When we wish to achieve happiness in our lives, we must have this willingness to take risks to achieve that happiness. And then also when it comes to developing a relationship with God Almighty and discovering God Almighty, then there is an element of risk there as well. Our belief in God starts off as a hypothesis, where we just know based on indications that He should exist. And we know that developing a relationship with God should and perhaps will make us happy. But it is only by trying it and by pursuing it that we can actually reach any level of certainty in that regard. This is that natural process that Allah Ta'ala has put into place. Now, understanding this idea of pursuit of happiness is something that is fundamental to being able to realize the self-reformation that we want to achieve. One point that we covered last week was trying to understand why it is that we do things. If we want to make a change within ourselves, we don't just, it's a useless exercise to go into what we want to change about ourselves. Because if we have not understood why we want to change it, then we're going to fall into that same pattern of action that we were in before. Now, once we have been able to reflect on why we do what we do, there's a second question that comes up that we have to answer as well. And this second question is something that is harder to get to, but it is easier to answer. Because the first question that we had was the question of what is the motive behind our actions? Why do we do what we do? What are our intentions? And that's something that everyone's answer can vary on. Each person can have an individual answer on what it is and why he does that he does. A person who is materialistic can have his answer can be for the sake of money. Another person who is worried about his own status, he does it for respect. Somebody else who does it for the love of his family has a different motive. Somebody else who does it for the love of God Almighty, he has a different motive. So there are different categories of people who can have different answers to this question. And that is the sort of difficult question that we have to ask ourselves. But the next question that comes after this question is that what is the reason for why we do something? What is the why behind the why? And that seems like a deeply philosophical question, but it's actually the more easy question to answer. Because on this question, we all have the same answer. No matter how much our answers may vary as to why we do what we do, why we go to work every day, why we spend time with our friends, why we visit the websites that we visit, why we watch the TV shows that we watch, all of those reasons vary. But the reason behind those reasons is the same. And that reason is the pursuit of happiness. Everything that we do on an individual level, the motive behind the motive that we have is the pursuit of happiness. It's as simple as that. That's all we want in our lives. We just want to be happy. Nothing more and nothing less than that. And the reason that we go about having these different motives for doing what we do is because we believe that those things will make us happy. So if we wish to change the motives that we have, then we have to change and understand what it is that actually makes us happy. So it's just the same pattern that we take one step back. In the last week, we went through the exercise of how if we want to change what we are doing, we have to change why we are doing it. If we want to change what bad habits that we have to change why it is that we have those bad habits. When we change the why, when we change the motive that we have behind it, then those habits will change on their own. So now the next question that we have to ask ourselves is that, is this really making us happy? Why do we think that that motive will make us happy? Having a clear idea of the pursuit of happiness is something that can give us a greater clarity in our individual lives. For example, if a person is materialistic, if he spends his days wanting to become richer, wanting to have a nicer car and a nicer house, he does it because he thinks that it will make him happy. But he may not reflect on that fact. He may not analyze it on a daily basis. That is what I am doing really making me happy? It is sort of falling into a habit of activity and not reanalyzing our actions that a lot of times makes us do things blindly, makes us pursue a certain lifestyle without being able to change it and re-understand why we are doing it. So a person on a daily basis may go to work for the sake of increasing his status. He may be worried about the self-respect that he has. And a lot of his actions may be centered around that reason. A person may undermine other people at his work. He may have envy for them. He may try and sabotage their work. These are the motives behind why he has these different actions. And if he asks himself why he is doing it, the real reason is that he is doing it for the pursuit of happiness. He thinks that it will make him happy. He thinks that if I can just earn people's respect, then it will make me happy. If I can undermine this person, other person, the respect that he has, then it will improve the respect I have and that will make me happy. So that is the central motive behind it. This is also what we see in the story of Hazrat Yusuf as well. His brothers, they said that let's just get rid of Hazrat Yusuf, let's just get rid of Yusuf once and for all. We'll kill him or we'll sell him into slavery, we'll just throw him off, we'll abandon him, and then after that we'll be righteous people. Their motive was the pursuit of happiness. They thought that we'll do something that is evil, but once we do this wrong thing, then we'll be righteous afterwards and everything will be perfect and we'll be able to be happy afterwards. So this is the reason why we do the good things that we do and the bad things that we do, whether we recognize it or understand it or not. Now when we wish to reform and change our motives, the reason for why we do something, one way that we can do it is to have a clear understanding on a daily basis that everything we are doing is for the sake of happiness. When we go to work, is the reason why we are going to work, is it making us happy? When we spend time with our family, when we do work for the Jamaat, when we serve humanity, is the reason why we are doing it, is it making us happy? This doesn't mean that we necessarily have to change what we are doing. Unless a person has a very dysfunctional lifestyle, a lot of times, most of our lives do not have to be changed to bring about this reformation. We can go about our normal routine. But the question that has to be asked is, why are we doing it? A person could be going to work on a daily basis and doing it for the wrong why, and he could be miserable. A person could be doing service of humanity, and he could be doing it for the wrong reason, and he could be miserable as well. And so a person who just changes his motive, he can change his happiness that he has within himself. So the Prophet ﷺ said in the first hadith that is narrated in Bukhari that إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, that surely deeds are judged by motives. And that is how important our deeds are. That is how much of an influence they have on us. And so, if we wish to make a fundamental change within our lives, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to change our behavior or our surroundings. Sometimes when people are getting caught in depression or a prolonged period of sadness or want to change something, they move somewhere and they change their environment. They change their career, they change everything about themselves. And sometimes it's effective, but a lot of times they're just running from their own selves. They change the what in their lives, they change their circumstances without addressing the why, without addressing why they're doing what they're doing. So we can make a revolution within our lives without changing a whole lot on the surface. When we have a clear idea and understanding that everything that we do on a daily basis is for the pursuit of happiness, then it can bring us to an understanding of what it is that we actually think is making us happy. We may not even realize it, but a lot of things that we don't even realize that we think make us happy are motivating a lot of our actions. And so this can be a means of self-reformation. So having this clear motive in mind can give us a new level of clarity. Allah Ta'ala has taught us that ibadat is the central purpose of our lives. As Masih Maud has defined ibadat to mean that we have no purpose except for Allah Almighty, that la matluba li, wa la mahbuba li, wa la ma'buda li, wa la maqsuda li illallah, that I have no purpose, I have no object, I have no desire, I have no mahbub or love except for Allah Almighty. If we wish to develop a life that is centered around seeking the pleasure of Allah Almighty, it is not something that happens magically overnight. This is an aspect of tarbiyat. It's something that we have to convince ourselves of. It's not just tabligh where we have to convince non-Muslims and non-Ahmadis that they should love Allah Almighty. But we on an individual level need to be convinced of this as well. So if we want to make seeking the pleasure of Allah Almighty the central purpose of our lives, we have to be convinced that it will make us happy in the first place. So if we can get to this level of self-reflection, then for the vast majority of us, the ball will get rolling on its own. If we can ask ourselves that the reason why we do what we do on a daily basis, is it really making us happy? Just that simple question will reform us on its own. Because then automatically that reflection will lead us to the conclusion that all the money that I have earned has not truly made me happy. Whatever I have done that has been away from God Almighty has not really given me that real serenity. Allah Ta'ala in the Holy Quran does not tell us to worship Him just because He said so. He gives us reasons. He tells us that if you are seeking happiness in the world, then that mutual rivalry and seeking respect in the world and seeking wealth is only going to deceive you until you reach your graves. If the central purpose of our happiness, if we think that our family alone and our friends alone will give us happiness, Allah Ta'ala says in the Holy Quran that when the day of judgment comes and the prospect of punishment and the fear of punishment comes upon a person, then even a nursing mother would abandon her child to save herself from that punishment. So that happiness, that even the closest relationship in human relationships that is found in it, even that would not be enough to sustain a person through that trial and through that crisis. So if we can get to this point of asking ourselves that whatever motive that we have on a daily basis, is it making us happy? Then automatically we will be led eventually to the conclusion that no, it ultimately is not making me happy. It is giving me a fleeting feeling of happiness. It is giving me a sort of taste of that bliss. But ultimately it is something that eludes me. And so then we do not really have to have it preached to us or told to us or pounded into us that you should love God Almighty and make the pleasure of God the main purpose and central purpose of our lives. But it is a conclusion that we will naturally and in and of ourselves reach within ourselves. So this is the sort of second phase of that reflection. The first is to ask ourselves why it is that we do what we do. And then the second phase, and a point that we can reflect on today, is that understanding that the reason why we do everything that we do is for the pursuit of happiness. And are our motives really making us happy? And what motive is it that would truly give us that happiness? This is a question that is extremely important to ask on an individual level. Many times as we go through our lives, we do things for a certain reason, and then we just continue doing it because we get into the habit of doing it. And even if it is making us miserable, we just continue doing it because we don't know any better. About the children of Israel in the Bible, it is narrated that when they left the oppression of the Egyptians and the Pharaoh, and they were free in the deserts, they kept on complaining to Hazrat Musa alayhi salam, saying that, why did you pull us out of the land of milk and honey to the lives that we had into this sort of hardship and this hell? They were people who had become so accustomed to slavery and oppression that is actually what made them happy. Being free was something that did not compensate for the hardships that they had to bear in the wilderness. So a person can get accustomed to slavery, even to oppression. So even if our daily motives are not things that are making us happy, if we don't reflect on it, just out of pure habit, we can continue doing what we are doing on a daily basis for the reason that we are doing it, in the delusion that we think that it will ultimately make us happy. So this is why this analysis is important, and this sort of reevaluation of our motives and trying to find whether it is actually making us happy or not. So this is something that is a basic part of our nature. It is something that is such an inalienable human right that it is found in the basic constitution of many countries as well, that each person has the inalienable right of the pursuit of happiness. So if we can just hone in on this purpose, each of us, myself included, then it can improve our spiritual condition and our efforts towards self-reformation in our lives. So may Allah Almighty grant us the pursuit of happiness and true happiness, which is to be found in His nearness and in love with Him. Alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu wa nu'minu bihi wa natawakkalu alayhi wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. There are a few announcements. Inshallah, we'll be holding a regional Sirat al-Nabi Jalsa at Masjid Mubarak on Sunday, the 25th of January at 2 p.m. Naseem Mahdi Sahib will be presiding. A flyer is available for all members to invite their non-Ahmadi Muslim friends. Refreshments will be served after the Jalsa. Please plan on attending with family and guests. Also, Central Virginia Amla meeting will be held on this Sunday, January 11th at 9 o'clock a.m. All Amla members are requested to arrive by 8:30 so the meeting can start on time. Also, please remember all members who are sick and going through treatment, especially the mother of Harun and Mahmood Rashid Sahib, Sahibzada Tahir Latif Sahib, Abdul Sameem Jadran Sahib, Mansoor Pal Sahib, and Sister Askari Chaudhry Sahiba, who are suffering from serious illness. May Allah grant them full and speedy recovery. Finally, the Maghrib prayer time will change to 6:15 from tonight, inshallah. All the other prayer timings are the same.
5:15.
5:15. عباد الله رحمكم الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون اذكروا الله يذكركم وادعوه يستجب لكم ولذكر الله أكبر